Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Welcome to the 25th episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. And today we have a wonderful listener question from Sandy. But before we dive into that, I wanted to make sure that you knew about my free kidney stone class coming up in January 2024, which is just around the corner, if you can believe it. On January 18th of next year, which is just next month, I'm hosting a free class at noon titled Help, I Have a Kidney Stone, Now What? I've been doing these classes every couple months, and it's so much fun to connect with many of you live. There's usually hundreds of people on these classes, and it's a free class, so why not? If you're at all interested in joining me, again, that is going to be on January 18th of next year, 2024, at noon. Go ahead and register at www.kidneystoneclass.com, and I am really excited to see many of you there. So with that, let's go ahead and listen to what Sandy has to ask us today.
Hello, Melanie. I just had a kidney stone removed a few months ago, so would like to prevent future stones. I have two questions for you. Number one, how much lemon in 2 liters of water is suggested? Opinions vary from 1/2 cup of lemon per day to 1 squeezed lemon per day. Secondly, how much turmeric can a person take? I understand turmeric is for non-inflammatory and perhaps cancer prevention. And I understand that people combine the turmeric with black pepper, and turmeric and black pepper, according to the charts, are high in oxalates. Thank you for this opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you, Sandy, for that wonderful question. There is a lot to dive into in that question, so we'll go ahead and dive right in. So the first question Sandy had was, how much lemon juice should I have? It sounds like she's seen estimates online from anywhere between 1/4 to 1/2 cup per day. And of course, the answer is not straightforward. It's going to very, very much differ from person to person. So let's back up a little bit and talk about why lemon juice is even talked about in kidney stone world in the first place. And the answer really comes down to citrate. So citrate is a compound that is in our urine, and it's really good for stone prevention. So we want high amounts of citrate in our urine typically for kidney stone prevention. The reason that it's so beneficial for us is because it binds with calcium to make a compound that can be dissolved. So basically it kind of gets rid of that calcium, honestly, dissolves it at least in our urine. So then that calcium isn't available to bind to things like oxalate or phosphate, which is really, really great because that's going to help us prevent stones. And I feel like oftentimes, when we think about this citrate from a molecular level, it sounds sort of an afterthought, that sounds like a really great thing, but maybe a bonus for me for stone prevention. But honestly, low levels of urine citrate are a pretty big deal. Everything else in a 24-hour urine test can look completely normal, and just low urine citrate for some people is enough to form stones. And so citrate really, really is an important thing and an important piece of the conversation for many of us. So to the question, how much lemon juice should you have? So lemon juice, as we know, is a really potent source of citrate. And really, it's going to come down to your 24-hour urine test, as always. And the reason for that is because many people who form stones don't have low urine citrate. There are so many different potential causes for your kidney stones. It's impossible for me to know how much citrate is good for you unless I know what your urine citrate is on that 24-hour urine test, and also understand what other foods you're eating to kind of help me put it all together. So kind of looking into the amount of citrate that you're going to get from lemon juice versus some other common sources of citrate. So potassium citrate is a medication and supplement that is very, very commonly prescribed for kidney stone prevention because it's a potent dose of citrate and alkali. aka base, which I'll talk a little bit more later. We're going to have to do a little bit of high school chemistry, so bear with me. As you know, I like to get sciencey in my answers always. So potassium citrate is very commonly recommended in a 20 milliequivalent dose, typically in 2 10 milliequivalent pills, is a pretty common dose for potassium citrate. So when we look at how much citrate is actually in that, that's pretty much all potassium citrate, obviously, right? So if we look at one potassium citrate pill, which is 10 milliequivalents of citrate, a half cup of lemon juice is going to have about 20 milliequivalents. And so basically, bottom line, that was a lot of words to say that a half cup of lemon juice is essentially equivalent to the common dose of potassium citrate that's prescribed, which is 20 milliequivalents of potassium citrate. I think it's interesting to kind of look at some other common sources of citrate that we talk about. So sodium bicarbonate is another medication that's often prescribed, and one sodium bicarbonate pill has about 8 milliequivalents of citrate. Crystal Light lemonade, like the stuff that we drank in the 90s, and I guess still drink today. I think about it as the 90s. I don't really know why, but Crystal Light lemonade specifically actually has a ton of citrate in it, and it's often recommended for people who have low urine citrate to help get that up. One packet that will go into 1 liter of water, if you were making that Crystal Light according to the package instructions, has about 22 milliequivalents of citrate. So Crystal Light is another great way to get that citrate if that is something that you need and you enjoy Crystal Light. Another big benefit of that is that you're getting fluid in, right? We all need to be drinking more fluid, and so sometimes adding flavor to our water in the form of something like Crystal Light can be helpful. There's also a fair amount of citrate in Diet Lemon Lime Soda. So this is talking about like Diet Squirt, Diet 7-Up. There is citrate in that as well, somewhere between 8 to 10 milliequivalents of citrate per liter of that. So that is an option if that's something that you want to explore. And there's also citrate supplements. So Moonstone and Litholyte are the two most common ones that tend to be discussed. So one packet of Moonstone has a ton of citrate in it, about 25 milliequivalents of citrate, and one packet of Litholyte has about 10 milliequivalents of citrate in it. I am an affiliate for Moonstone, so I'll put my affiliate link down there, and you actually get a discount if you purchase through that link. So go ahead and check that out if that is something that you're interested in. And we'll talk more about who might need some of these supplements and some of these more potent sources of citrate, whether it be potassium citrate or lemon juice or Moonstone or whatever we're talking about, because I think it really is important to understand, why are you making stones? Because again, not everyone with kidney stones is going to have low urine citrate, and so there very well may be other things going on in your urine that are a whole lot more important for us to be focusing on than trying to get in all this citrate. Plus, there's actually perhaps better ways to get our urine citrate up than lemon juice in the first place. So let's dive into that. So all of that information was about who might need to get more citrate in their diet. We've got to look at that 24-hour urine test. FYI, the cutoffs, if you are looking at your 24-hour urine test right now, is the cutoffs are generally seen as at least 550 milligrams of citrate in that 24-hour period for women, or at least 450 milligrams of citrate per day for men. So like I said, we can certainly look at these really large doses of citrate and alkali to help increase urine citrate if you do discover that that's something that you need to do. But when we look at the data and look at nutrition, there's actually a much more effective way and much more healthful way, sort of holistic way, if you will, to get citrate up by looking at sort of our whole diet. So this is where that high school chemistry is going to dive in. So we're going to come in. So bear with me as we dive into this. So really a better way to increase urine citrate, and the way that I teach students in Kidney Stone Nutrition School to increase urine citrate, is to really work at promoting our body's excretion of potassium and alkali and citrate in our urine in the first place. So this is a lot more than just trying to get citrate in specifically into our diet. So let's back up again. So citrate is a source of alkali, which is the same thing as base, or the opposite of acid. And so our kidneys, one of their main functions is to work really, really hard to maintain the right balance of acid and alkali in our body. That's our kidneys handle the bulk of our acid-base balance in our bodies. And so our kidneys are constantly sort of checking in and saying like, okay, we need to keep some more acid today, get rid of acid today, we need to keep alkali, get rid of alkali, to help keep our body's pH in a very tight range. Because if our pH gets too high or too low, our body doesn't work. We're going to die. And so our kidneys work really, really hard to keep that right balance. And funny enough, the most of the acid that your kidneys have to deal with actually comes from the food that you eat, which I think is really fascinating to think about, and really kind of cool to think about the power, if you will, that nutrition could have in this situation for all of us. And so when you eat a diet that's really high in acid producing foods and you're not eating enough alkali or base producing foods, your kidneys are going to hold on to a lot more alkali, aka citrate, because remember, citrate is a really strong form of alkali, and it's not going to excrete it in the urine, which is where we want it for stone prevention. So let me say that again. So when you're eating a ton of acid producing foods, and we'll talk about what that looks like in just a second, so you're eating all this acid producing foods, your body is going to have to hold on to that alkali to neutralize all that acid that you're eating, essentially, instead of excreting it into your urine, which is where we want it for stone prevention. So that really, looking at the whole acid production of your diet and reducing that is really a much better way to get more citrate in your urine versus just consuming a whole bunch of citrate all at once. So hopefully that makes sense. I actually have a blog post that talks about this a bit more. I will link two good blog posts on this topic. So I'll link to those in the show notes so you can read up on this more if you're interested. So let's dive into the good stuff. So what is this acid producing diet that I'm talking about? So basically it's going to be a balance between eating too much of acid producing foods and not enough of those alkali producing foods. And remember, alkali is that opposite of base. So we want to have less acid producing and more of this base producing to help the balance kind of come into neutral a little bit more. So acid producing foods are always non-dairy animal proteins. So I know we talk about this term non-dairy animal protein a lot in kidney stone prevention, and that really comes down to any sort of flesh protein, flesh animal protein. That sounds a little bit harsh, but I can never think of any other way to describe it. So dairy tends to be pretty neutral when it comes to acid-base production, but other animal proteins, so things like beef, chicken, and even fish and seafood, all produce quite a bit of acid after we eat them. Just the process of metabolizing those particular foods produces acid. On the flip side, all fruits and vegetables, literally every single one of them, is going to produce base or alkali. So it's every single fruit or vegetable can help neutralize the acid from the animal protein that you're consuming. So again, bottom line, non-dairy animal proteins, beef, chicken, fish, pork, fish, seafood, all of those animal proteins produce acid, whereas all fruits and vegetables produce base. And so the key is finding the right balance. I'm not saying that you need to stop eating chicken. Please do not say, Melanie said I couldn't eat chicken or couldn't eat fish. No, that's not what I'm saying. The key is to make sure you're not eating too much and that you're eating enough fruits and vegetables to help neutralize the acid, because we all need some protein, certainly, but the key is we don't need that much. And most of us really are eating a whole lot more protein than our bodies need, despite what the protein supplement industry and the personal trainer at your gym is probably telling you. So, also, just as a side note, having too much non-dairy animal protein can also increase your urine calcium, oxalate, can send your urine pH too low and send your uric acid levels up too. So there's a lot of other benefits when we look at that urine test in terms of getting in the right amount of non-dairy animal protein. So the question always is, well, how much protein should I eat? Of course, the answer is going to be completely different for you. When we talk about total protein intake, we tend to talk about somewhere between, say, 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. Now, that does include all protein sources. That is not just animal protein, but that is a good sort of rule of thumb if you want to kind of check in with yourself, like, okay, how much protein am I really eating? That's about about how much protein most of us should need. Of course, that's a pretty big range, and whether you're on the higher or lower end of that range is going to depend on your body size, your lifestyle, any other comorbid, other health conditions that you might have, and all sorts of things. And that's where it's really, really important to work with a dietitian. You can work with me in Kidney Stone Nutrition School to kind of help you figure these specifics out, but that gives you at least a good starting point to know how much protein you should be eating. So once you figure out if you're eating even the right amount of protein in the first place, you then look at kind of where is that protein coming from, and if there's room to maybe reduce that non-dairy animal protein, then that's generally a good idea if we're talking about getting citrate down. So, and then on the flip side, how many fruits and vegetables should you have? I mean, honestly, there's probably not a limit. Of course, there is a limit, but like most of us are getting so few fruits and vegetables, it's really ridiculous to even put that out there. The baseline, I would say, is at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables total per day. One serving, for the record, is about 1 cup raw fruit or vegetable and a half cup cooked fruit or vegetable. So putting that all together, we want to make sure that we're eating the right amount of protein, maybe reducing that non-dairy animal protein and swapping in some more plant proteins if those things are delicious to you, and also making sure you're getting enough fruits and vegetables, at least 5 servings a day. So all of this will help get that acid-based stuff more in order, basically, so that your kidneys will excrete that citrate or alkali in your urine and help get that citrate where it can work for us to prevent stones. So I hope all of that makes sense. I know that is a ton of information, and probably a lot more information than you were looking for, but really thinking about this whole diet approach to getting that citrate up tends to be a lot more effective. And also, it tends to, honestly, it's just like good for us for lots of other reasons, both from a stone prevention and in a total diet, sort of total health standpoint. I also wanted to say that many people can get that urine citrate into normal range with diet alone. If you are working on that protein, making sure you're eating tons of produce, we really don't need to add these things like potassium citrate or moonstone if you can get that citrate into normal range with diet alone. That being said, a lot of people can't. Low urine citrate is one of the things that we think is one of the many genetic links to kidney stones. So for whatever reason, some of us were just made to have low urine citrate, and we can be doing everything, quote, perfectly, whatever that word means when it comes to what we eat, and we just cannot get that citrate up. And in that case, I think that there's definitely a place for things like moonstone or potassium citrate, and that can be a really, really helpful tool for many people. One small caveat with that is that if you do have high urine pH, ask your doctor if something like potassium citrate or moonstone or litholite or adding crystallite to your diet in that quantity is a really good idea for you, because all of these citrate sources are alkali, they're base, and they're going to raise your urine pH, which is a good thing for many of us. But if you already have high urine pH, definitely ask your doctor if it's a good idea for you. So bottom line, how much lemon juice is right for you completely depends on your 24-hour urine test. It depends on if you even have low urine citrate in the first place, and this is something that we even need to bring into the discussion, and if we can get that urine citrate up into the normal range with other diet changes that make a whole lot more sense than drinking a whole bunch of lemon juice. All right, Sandy. So the last piece of your question was about turmeric and black pepper. How much is safe for you to consume as a stone former? So again, my answer is going to depend on your 24-hour urine test. The concern with turmeric and black pepper is that both of these things taken in supplement form can be very high in oxalate. I will say that using turmeric or black pepper in your cooking doesn't concern me one bit, simply because the amount that you're going to consume is not going to be adding that much oxalate to your day. But when we're taking supplements, which are meant to be very concentrated, high doses of these things, there is definitely potential for these things to be really high in oxalate. So my question A is, do you even have high urine oxalate in the first place? If you do, I would say stay away from these supplements. Honestly, the data to support taking turmeric or curcumin for all of these different health conditions isn't super strong. And because I do have this pretty valid concern that it could raise your urine oxalate quite significantly, I've definitely seen These supplements raise urine oxalate for people. I would recommend just avoiding them. But if this is something that you feel very strongly about, or you feel that it is something that is helping you, you can do a test, right? So do a urine test taking these supplements. If you don't have high urine oxalate, even when you're on these supplements, then cool, like go ahead and continue on with it. But if you do have that high urine oxalate, I would say that's probably the first thing that I'd recommend cutting out to help us get that urine oxalate down. So hopefully that helps get you answers to your question, Sandy. There's not straightforward answers for either of those questions, like so many things in stone prevention. Every single kidney stone and every single kidney stone former is different, and it's all going to depend on your urine chemistry, what makes sense for you. So with that, I'm going to close this episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. Don't forget to register for my free masterclass coming up in January, on January 18th, 2024 at noon Eastern Time. Help, I have a kidney stone, now what? You can register for free at www.kidneystoneclass.com, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.